Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Monday Bagel, the podcast exploring the fascinating intersection of AI, law, and technology. I'm your host, Michał Jackowski, and today I'm very excited to welcome back a distinguished guest, Professor Daniel Schwarcz. Professor Schwarcz is an award-winning scholar and professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. His research focuses on insurance law and regulation, systemic risks, health insurance, litigation, and importantly, the impact of artificial intelligence on the legal profession, legal education, and consumer protection. But he was in 2023 my guest on Monday Bagel, where we discussed his first groundbreaking study on AI use in performing legal tasks. Today he is back because we are going to discuss his recent new paper about AI-powered lawyering. Daniel, it's great you could join me again. Welcome back again.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Let's dive straight into your latest research. 2 years ago, you conducted similar study or a study on similar topic, evaluating AI performance in legal tasks. What inspired you to revisit this topic today, and what goals did you have to do this study?
Yeah, I would say that there were two things that motivated me. So the first is there are, of course, a number of different studies and metrics out there evaluating how well AI performs in the legal domain, but virtually all of them really focus on comparing how AI performs relative to human lawyers. And to me, that is not, I mean, while helpful in some ways, it's not the best way to try to measure how AI is going to affect lawyering and the practice of law. And that's because no one right now is imagining that for most legal tasks, we're just going to completely offshore it to an AI and leave it alone. Instead, the consensus for now is that what is going to happen with AI is that humans are going to use AI and it's going to make them more effective or efficient and perhaps better lawyers. And so the real relevant question is whether or not human lawyers who have AI perform better or more efficiently than human lawyers who do not have AI. And that's just to me a really different question than how does AI perform relative to humans for a variety of reasons. But the most significant is sometimes it's more difficult to check someone else's work than to do it your own. And sometimes having someone else start off your work actually can lead you down a bad path. So I really wanted to focus on this question of how humans perform with AI compared to how they perform without it.
Oh, that's really interesting, especially how rapidly things have changed since we last met. And
Exactly.
we can see how AI technologies evolve just slightly above 1 year. So could you
Exactly.
share the key findings? Maybe you could compare the results to what you discovered in your previous study. Are the outcomes different?
Yeah, exactly. And what you allude to is sort of the second reason why I wanted to do this again, which is in our past research, what we had really focused on was GPT-4.
Okay.
And at the time, that was sort of the cutting edge AI technology. But since our last study, which used a randomized control experiment to compare how humans perform with AI compared to how humans perform without AI, of course, the AI field has moved ahead a lot. And so in our study, we really wanted to focus in on two newer developments using this sort of basic research design of comparing AI powered humans to non AI powered humans. So, first, we wanted to look at reasoning models. These are a
Mm-hmm.
new class of models that use computational resources after the point of training to try to, sometimes people will call it sort of think through a problem before
Mm-hmm.
answering it. Um, and then the second tool we wanted to really evaluate, because it's being used by a lot of lawyers, is retrieval-augmented generation,
Mm-hmm.
where an AI is powered with a database that can allow it to retrieve relevant documents to an inquiry, and then use those documents to actually produce results. What we did find is that AI was very helpful on these tasks and much more helpful in a lot of ways than GPT-4.
Okay.
So in our last study, what we found was that AI GPT-4 improved the efficiency of legal work product pretty significantly and pretty consistently, but it didn't improve the quality of legal work
Hmm.
product in our results. And there were at least some indications in one of our studies that for a number of our participants who had sort of very high baseline skills, using AI actually ended up undermining or harming overall quality. So in our latest study, we found a pretty different result. What we found was that AI usage actually improved the quality of the results for many of our participants across many of the tasks that we tested. And in both, this was true for both retrieval augmented generation and for reasoning models, and they sort of improved quality in different ways. So with the reasoning models, we found some real improvement in just like the analytical sophistication of the arguments and the legal analysis that was produced. And then by contrast with the retrieval augmented generation, we found fewer hallucinations um, relative to the use of a reasoning model. So, sort of two of the key metrics that you want to look at to see, okay, well, what happens when you use AI? We are finding that each of these technologies can make significant improvements. The efficiency benefits, persisted. So we are getting enhanced quality without a reduction in efficiency relative to the older AI model.
So that's intriguing and striking that it's such a substantial progress in just a short period. It's remarkable. So how do you assess this evolution of AI in legal tasks? Have you expected such the rapid progress?
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, one of my sort of abiding principles is it's very hard to know what will happen unless you test. And
Mhm.
there's so much hype in this space, and there's also so much skepticism that it's very hard to say what will happen in the future or what is happening unless we are continually sort of trying to empirically measure the right thing. So that's a big part of what is motivating me in my research. Um, I will say that it did not surprise me that we saw that rate of growth just because we had seen that previously. So even before I had done the earlier paper from 2 years ago, where we measured GPT-4, we had done a paper really right around the time of ChatGPT's initial release, looking at the initial version of
Mhm.
ChatGPT that was publicly released, GPT 3.5. And relative to GPT 3.5, GPT-4 had produced a lot of benefits in terms of efficiency and in terms of the quality of outputs that it could produce. Now, in those studies, we had not been using a randomized control trial looking at humans without AI versus humans with AI. We had just sort of been feeding it law school exams and other types of exams to the AI. But, it was very clear that GPT-4 was performing better on those benchmarks than GPT 3.5. So we had already seen pretty rapid improvement from GPT 3.5 to 4, and of course, what the initial version of ChatGPT could produce was shocking relative to anything that people had expected. So I would say that it's not surprising that the rate of advancement has continued at the same pace we had had before. But again, there were people who sort of had said that's not going to happen, right? I mean, there was a lot of chatter about a year ago about how AI is hitting a wall because there's no more training data,
Mhm.
there's no more capacity to scrape any more information from the web. There are going to be copyright restrictions, and so we've just
Mhm.
plateaued. And I think so. Again, that's a plausible story. It sometimes progress plateaus, but I think both hypotheses were valid,
Mhm.
and neither result would have been surprising to me. But the fact that we continued having very significant improvement, is suggestive to me that, again, my hypothesis will be that if we wait another year, we're going to have yet further improvement. And I will say this. even the results of our study, I think, understate where AI is right now for two reasons. The first is, recall we separately tested a retrieval augmented generation tool, Vincent AI, and a reasoning model. But the retrieval augmented generation tool that we tested didn't use a reasoning model as its foundation model. It used GPT-4. And what we found was enhancements that each of these models sort of produced enhancements relative to GPT-4 in different ways. And so it's very clear from those results that if you combine the two technologies, and that's already being done, it's not terribly difficult to change your foundation model from GPT-4 to these reasoning models at this point, that you're going to get even larger improvements than what we measured. So that's the first thing. We separately measured the improvements from each of these technologies, but they're already capable of being combined in ways that will, at the very least, presumably create additive benefits. But the second piece is, we measured O1 preview. That was the reasoning model we used. And that was the very first reasoning model that was publicly available in late 2024 that OpenAI released. At this point, we have a number of more advanced reasoning models. OpenAI has released O3 is their latest model. And there are a number of other reasoning models that are out there. Anthropic recently released a reasoning model. Of course, DeepSeek has released a reasoning model.
European Mistral as well.
Oh, Mistral as well. There you go. I don't want to leave Mistral out. Absolutely. So reasoning models are already advancing significantly relative to what we looked at. And again, a lot of the sort of claims about what was going to hold AI back in terms of the lack of additional training data, they're not applicable to reasoning models. Because reasoning models don't produce improvements through further training data. So my expectation, it's not a guarantee, but my expectation is we're going to continue seeing advances in the capabilities of AI to improve lawyering and supplement lawyering, and perhaps even at some point replace lawyers in some domains.
So I would like to discuss it later, but just staying with your paper, you involved law students to work with AI. You say that the results between students working with AI and without AI differ. Do you think results could significantly differ if the participants were experienced practicing lawyers, or you would assume the outcomes similar, maybe not the results similar, but the differences between lawyers with AI and without AI performing the same tasks?
Yeah, it's an important question, and one of the real challenges with doing the type of work that we're doing, where we're looking at how humans perform with AI and without AI, is we can't use a team of real lawyers because of how expensive they are. We had 150 participants, and to pay 150 lawyers to do hours and hours and hours of work is just not feasible given the funding limitations we have. If anyone listening wants to donate, thousands of hours of lawyer time, I'm willing to listen. So of course we ended up using second best, which is second and third year law students. Now, I should point out we use second and third year law students at the University of Minnesota and the University of Michigan, which are really good law schools. So our both are on the top 20, by U.S. News and World Report, and tend to produce the more elite law students that go and work at the elite law firms. And what we found, we didn't find differences between second and third year law students. We found consistent improvements. So to me, it's a pretty easy inference to say that our results would apply to young associates at law firms, because our participants, really, for all intents and purposes, were very similar to young associates. Some firms maybe not quite as experienced as other firms, maybe better, because again, we had a lot of really elite students who were participating. It is much harder to say that these results will generalize to more experienced lawyers, and there are two reasons for that. One is the reason we're talking about right now, which is just that our participants were much more similar to young lawyers than to more experienced lawyers. And the second is we specifically developed our tasks, that we tested 6 different legal tasks to be the types of tasks that you would assign to young lawyers, first, second, third year associates at a law firm, consistent with our so that was our focus. And I think it's an open question how AI can help more experienced lawyers. Let me just speculate on that for a minute. My own personal experience is, and I've heard this from many other people, that actually AI can be much more of an efficiency supercharger when you're already an expert. And that's because it is so much easier as an expert to judge whether or not the output that AI is producing is good or not, or to make changes. Well, I mean, if we think about what do expert, more sophisticated advanced lawyers do, it's
Mhm.
not producing the first drafts, it's doing editing, it's making sure everything's right, it's knowing what the way things should look, so that the increment between the sort of drafts you get from the associates and the things that go out to the real world is improved. And so in a lot of ways, I anticipate that AI can actually be more useful to expert experienced lawyers than to younger lawyers for that reason, at least among people who are really skilled at using AI. Of course, many, I guess the countervailing point is many folks who are more experienced, more expert, frankly, have less knowledge
Mhm.
how to use these tools effectively. And I think the younger generation is more being trained at the outset to develop those tools. So again, that all is speculation, and here I am saying,
Mhm.
well, we don't want to speculate too much, we want to follow the empirics. At the same time, I think speculation based on the empirical results is warranted, as long as one sort of keeps in
Yeah.
mind we don't know until we really test.
So we should call to action law firms, call to action, and maybe they could provide some kind of support to the next research and get some associates, younger associates, junior lawyers, or maybe more experienced one. I would love to see further research comparing these groups of lawyers. So you mentioned it a bit. But what conclusions can we draw about the impact of AI on the pace and quality of legal work, and maybe the structure and efficiency how law firms operate? What outcomes do you get from your research?
Yeah, so one way of sort of summarizing all of it is we sort of measured productivity, and we measured productivity as the effect of providing AI on the number of points per minute that participants were able to score. So they spent a certain amount of time on each task, and we recorded that. And then, of course, they received a certain number of points in the grading, and the grading was all blindly done by experts in the field. And so you can sort of think about that a productivity measure is the sort of core thing that law firms and clients should care about. And we saw productivity gains of almost 150% on some tasks. Now, on other tasks, interestingly, we saw very low productivity gains in the 10 or 11% range that were not statistically significant. So, number one conclusion is for certain tasks, AI is a real game changer, and it needs to be embraced in that way. Because if I tell you there's a technology that can produce 150% productivity gains, and by the way, that's the low end estimate because we weren't testing. I mean, you'd be crazy not to really embrace that. And by the way, those productivity gains are both along the dimension of increasing the speed with which work can be done and the quality. So there's no trade off really there. So again, for certain tasks, I just think it's an absolute no brainer. And I think that we're just starting to see this be embraced. But I also think at the same time, there are conflicting interests there, right? I mean, I think some law firms
Mhm.
don't want to bill less,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's.
So I think I think that it's not just incumbent on law firms, but it's incumbent on clients to be pushing this. Now the other thing is, uh, 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 it varies, right? It varies based on the actual lawyer. the impact of AI, it varies based on the nature of the task. So as I said, there were some tasks we tested where we saw these massive gains, where there were other tasks where we saw very limited gains. Um, we saw differences across lawyers. There are other differences as well. There are differences in terms of the tools that we were using. And we've already talked about other differences that we weren't able to test, right? The level of experience of the lawyer is one. Um, so, uh, my bottom line on all of this is that law firms need to be implementing really, and clients need to be insisting on really sophisticated ways of consistently measuring the results associated with using AI versus not using AI in a variety of different ways across a variety of different tasks for a variety of different lawyers. So this is essentially a call to action that law firms need to be empirically testing what they're doing on a regular, ongoing basis. And that's because the technology is changing so much, and what it can do is changing so much. And this is a really different orientation than law firms have traditionally had. I mean, law firms and clients have never sort of empirically tested different ways of doing law. They've just
Mhm.
sort of done it. And maybe there's some informal anecdotal, oh, use this form when you're doing the next contract because it's helpful, or oh, talk to Bob because Bob is really good at, whatever this particular type
Mhm.
of deal. Um, but there's not been the systematic, empirically grounded approach. And in my mind, that needs to basically become part of the practice of law, which is a real, yeah, it's difficult because it requires resources. But given how quickly benefits are efficiencies are developing, given how quickly the field is moving, and given how much variability there is in terms of the implications, I think that sort of constant self-assessment is has to be fundamental to the practice of law generally.
So should lawyers feel threatened or reassured by these advancements in AI, or maybe final questions? Will do you believe AI can realistically replace lawyers, or will it play a supportive role still? Because what you say is could be quite scary for somebody who doesn't follow the changes and doesn't measure the things you mentioned.
Yeah. So it's very hard to know, right? I mean, that starts getting into the speculative world where we're saying, okay, well, what's the world going to look like in 5 years, 10 years? And I don't have answers there.
But let's
Um,
speculate.
let's
We
speculate. Fair
speculated
enough.
a bit during
Fair,
our talk, so
fair enough. No, no. As long as the speculation is empirically informed, I think it's worthwhile. Right now, I think it could go multiple ways. Right now, I do think that many law firms and lawyers will be able to do more with less. But whether they choose then to um, do more and use the same number of lawyers and just be able to do more deals, to do more in litigation, or instead to cut back on the number of employees is really hard to know. And I think there's a lot of just contingent factors there. In litigation, for instance, the fact that, if your opponent can do more, well, you have to do more and match them. And so litigation might be a context, at least in high stakes settings, where we don't see a decrease in lawyers. That would be my prediction. My prediction is that in lower stakes settings, especially in settings where, for instance, the defense budget is controlled by insurers who have budgets,
Mhm.
that we may actually see a decline in the resources in that are used to litigate cases. In deal settings, I would expect, because it's not as adversarial, that there will be efficiencies that will reduce demand for lawyers in some contexts, but that also may make more deals and more types of services more available with induced demand. So again, hard to know for sure. That's all in the short term. In the medium to long term, I do foresee AI based tools almost completely replacing lawyers in some settings. So I've actually been working on a project where we're trying to get an entirely AI driven tool to function as well as a human when it comes to providing essentially advice to small business startups. And the reason why that type of thing, I think, eventually can be entirely replaced by AI is because the advice is a bit more mechanical. It is a bit more easy to combine and say, look, here are the, different algorithms that humans use explicitly to deal with different types of startups, and to combine that sort of explicit logic, those explicit logics and functions with generative AI, so that you're able to use Gen AI for specific types of tasks in ways that actually replicate what humans are doing. Those are settings in which retrieval augmented generation is very powerful, because you can have relevant forms that you marry with the system. Those are systems with agentic capabilities are really
Mhm.
powerful, right? In the U.S., right, going to file the relevant documents with the Secretary of State. I mean, that just requires being able to use a website and being able to do the proper clicks to upload your articles of incorporation. Um, so I do think that for certain types of more rudimentary legal tasks, we will, in not terribly long, get to a point where completely autonomous AI-driven systems can perform just as well as a human, and way more cheaply. So I do think we're in for a massive restructuring. Again, this is speculation
Mhm.
in legal fields that are more that are less complex, that are lower stakes, and that are performed by more commoditized types of practitioners who, you know, a decent lawyer can write you a will. There's not, for most people, a massive difference between hiring, a really fancy lawyer to write you a will versus a merely competent lawyer to write you a will. So those are types of things where, like, writing wills, filing articles of incorporation, and those types of things. I do see that we may not have human lawyers doing those types of things in the medium term, whatever that means.
I agree. Firstly, I had some guests here who wouldn't agree with you in both perspectives. So they take a conservative approach. Some of them take more straightforward approach. For me, it's a comforting perspective that there are going to be some complex cases where lawyers still will be necessary, and even using AI still responsible to integrate the tools, but to provide human assistance. That's comforting perspective. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing this valuable insights, helping us understand the complex future that lies ahead legal profession. Thank you for sharing data, because you are one of the few who has data where some others have intuition. So it's really crucial.
Great. No, I really appreciate being on here, and I encourage everyone to read the paper itself, where we have a lot more information and data in there that I think can be useful.
Yeah, I strongly encourage you to read it. It's the paper AI Powered Lawyering. It's a great paper. I will link it in the description of this episode, and in my posts on social media, so you can follow it really easily. And of course, I invite you to follow Monday Bagel, to subscribe, leave comments, discuss this episode, because it's really important to provide your view on the things we discuss. Share it with your colleagues interested in the intersection of law and technology, and stay tuned. Bye bye.